started the upload, although it looks like my connection is very slow and perhaps there's too much shit going on my computer too, but anyway. So it is especially useful in accessing areas of your psyche that are not usually available to your conscious mind and in showing you how current factors in a situation could play out in the future. You have the opportunity to change that future by heeding the messages and advice of others, of the cards. I understand that it's perfectly normal to say to change that future, but that's a figure of speech. It's kind of like people say, my reality, your reality. It's, this is one of those expressions where I think that it would behoove us to, just as some of us have switched from saying mankind to humankind, even arguably more importantly, to stop saying my reality, your reality, because by definition there's only one reality, unless of course you're in the philosophical camp, which is very widespread among philosophers and regular folk, that there's no such thing as reality. I argue that there is one reality. Let's not confuse perceptions of reality with reality. I would choose the word reality to imply within the definition that there's only one reality. As far as future, by saying that you have the opportunity to change that future, what people mean obviously is that we can decide what we do. Of course, in a universe in which everything else is also deciding what we do, and it often does not match. But technically speaking, change the future is that it doesn't work. It's a wonderful, arguably wonderful idiomatic expression that is very widespread, but there's an inherent flaw in it, which I think, let's say, if I had to say, how do we change that in a way that flows with sort of that can flow well with current language, instead of saying you have the opportunity to change that future, you have the opportunity to shape your future by heeding the messages and advice of the cards. Technically speaking, if we were to be even more inclusive towards the majority of the people that are very averse to cartomancy, which most of the tarot community doesn't really seem to be effectively doing anything about. They seem to be fairly happy with having their niche community, but that is not very good, because an average person that says you have the opportunity to shape your future by heeding the messages and and paying attention to the symbols of the cards would be less averse to interact with the tarot than if that person is heeding the messages and advice of the cards. Much as I do believe that there's the ultimate mystery, the quote-unquote divine, if you will, is in the cards, but the quote-unquote divine is also in your manhole covers. And it's just a side thought, but what is the tarot? The tarot cards are a system of divination, now also used to reflect psychological patterns. Again, when we go with the tarot cards are a system of divination, we are completely burning bridges. And even tarot historians would argue, no, the tarot cards were cards that were invented as a game, and then particularly around the 1800s, if I'm not mistaken, they exploded in terms of the divination aspect. I know I'm nitpicking, and if there's somebody from the future, would they would need to understand that this what Donna is writing here is actually perfectly fine in the context of the tarot community that exists in this day and age. So I'm not really criticizing as I am critiquing. Uh, but anyway, the tarot cards are a system of divination now also used to reflect psychological patterns and the dynamics of the unconscious mind. The exact date and place of origin of the tarot is much disputed, but it appears that they were condemned as quote-unquote the devil's picture book by the King of France. I think I've read this before. I mean, not the information. I've read this blog before. In my second email to you, or third email to you, I made a comment about how I made a list of things that I read and thought it seemed like I read more. And yeah, here is a case in point. I know I read this paragraph. Maybe I read the whole thing. But I didn't include in the list of things that I read when I made that list in an email. Okay, but by the King of France, Alphonse X, as Alphonse X, as early as 1332. The origin of the term tarot is similarly open to speculation, but it is usually accepted the term is probably derived from the northern Italian game of tarocchi or trumps. Again, I kind of have an issue with that standard etymology thing, which, as you are indicating, Donna, is not standard. But to say you'd still want to know, okay, if tarot comes from tarocchi, well, where does tarocchi come from? Although that goes with any etymology, because if you look up the etymology of bibliography, and it'll tell you it comes from the Biblius, Greek, but then where did Biblius come from? The Greek, of course, most of them end up going back to the oldest sources, that most ancient and prehistoric sources that they can find in the European language and or other languages. So that, again, with origin, I guess it's a moot point to say what was the original wording, but it's interesting that in language theory, the preponderant the standard is that the notion is that words are completely arbitrary, which flies in the face of human experience, and it flies in the face of mama and baba being such universal words. And I've argued before, and this is completely contrary to current linguistic studies, premises. They don't even really talk about it. Last time I checked, which was a while ago, but grew up out of the Rome sounds more like the origin of more plausible origin for words that people will use for thunder, and for bird chirping. So to say that I can't believe, well, I mean I can't believe, but the intellectual community of language theory believes that at the origin of language there was no connection between the choice of the word, the sound of the word, and between the signifier and the signified. It's one of those instances where I keep thinking, is the world fucking stupid? How can these intellectuals say that? But then I go, okay, you keep thinking you're more thoughtful and loving and caring and towards others than other people, but your attitude of thinking these people are idiots. The whole intellectual language theory community, much as I love them and they're intelligent, and I drew talking with them about shit like signifiers and signified, is actually saying that there's no connection between the original sounds of words and the meaning, that the sound is arbitrary, that the word. So am I being an asshole? My mantra recently, with my epiphany about the fact that maybe I didn't realize that I have been disrespecting people, My mantra is I want to implement and or produce and implement the most effective and efficient way for me to always respect others, and I want to implement and or produce and implement the most effective and efficient way for me to always understand others. And of course, the fundamental thing, whether you're dealing with tinnitus, your friend dying, or the most horrible thing is how can God be doing this? And to find quote unquote God, for those of you that are not Donna, I mean, you have to, by God I mean the ultimate mystery, and look up ancientshaman.com. Go to, if you're coming into this, never mind, but anyway, yeah, there's so much of my making this video, this audio, that feels less like the, the therapy of my talking to Donna, which I had yesterday. And I keep sliding back into, in fact, I feel the tension in my body. Whereas the therapy yesterday really felt like I'm talking to somebody. I don't need to explain everything because I feel like I'm talking to somebody, and we're starting from a point, we're continuing from the point. Now every comment that I make, I want to explain shit as if I was talking to somebody that comes into the middle of this right now, which is completely different from my purpose of the therapeutic virtual relationship with somebody. Sorry, this is. The original term is similarly open to speculation, but is usually accepted today. The term is probably derived from the Northern Italian game of tarot or trumps. Indeed, the 22 major arcana are often called the trump cards. Perhaps the very first tarot deck was the Visconti's Sforza of the 1400s. And is it a coincidence that Donald Trump is called Trump? Although no complete set survives of the Visconti Sforza deck. But you can watch all 14 seasons of Celebrity Apprentice on if you look up Mantray Zero on YouTube, Mantray 0 on YouTube. At least as far as up to last year, the powers that be at the Trump organization had decided not to take it down with any copyright notices. Okay, in 1888, an occult society established in the UK called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn transformed the terror by applying their knowledge of mystical and philosophical traditions from many different cultures: ancient Greek and Egyptian myth, Christianity, paganism, astrology, numerology, alchemy, Enochian magic, the Kabbalah, and more. As such, the guard, I've read this. So how does it work? The tarot works in a number of registers. The short, what to say? Okay, the tarot works in a number of registers. There are many different ways of consulting the cards and reading them that can function as modalities for types of inspiration. By the way, I've made a lot of critiques, but I love the way you're presenting this, Donna. If somebody was going to tell me, oh, Took, I want to look into the tarot, and can you tell me where's a good page? I'd say there are hundreds of them. Find your own, and mine are different. But a tarot.blogspot about tarot is excellent. So tarot works in a number of registers. There are many different ways of consulting the cards and reading them. They can function as modalities for types of inspiration, even at a mundane level. As memory triggers, guidance prompts, brainstorming, and psychological insight. However, when most people ask how it works, quote unquote, they mean how on earth did the right cards come up? Yeah, I remember reading this, which seemed to fit, and I think I said this subject that's very interesting to me, and I address it succinctly in one of the cards that I have at the About Next Gen Tarot page at nextgentarot.com. When people ask how it works, they mean how on earth do the right cards come up, which seem to fit as an answer to a question when other cards would not have been accurate answers. The short answer is that nobody really knows in any way that we can fully comprehend. However, if we want to say that they work in a way that is beyond the human propensity to perceive meaning and the random epiphania, then we must suppose something quote unquote outside of ourselves, which is at once quote unquote within us, or the cards could not show us our inner worlds, nor could they illuminate personal situations and relationships with others. This paragraph here, you're gonna hate the fact that I related to New Agey, Donna, but because you seem to be very had a strong antipathy for New Age. But while for the average person, arguably would have a sprinkling of New Agey, it's also much less, much much more neutral, which is what I go for with an extrashaman.com. It's a much more open, wide open portal for people that would be averse to, woo, to quote Benabel, or new agey or weird magic that people might be like, oh, I don't believe in that shit. This actually shows sort of your academic intellectual background, which is not necessarily required by any means, but trust me, folks, you don't need to go to the University School of Hard Knocks. Works better in a lot of ways, but you sound intelligent and balanced, and you're talking about spirituality here. You're talking about mysticism. You're talking about everybody being connected in something esoteric, which means inside, for those that don't know. But so you're talking about esotericism, the occult, mysticism, spirituality, the divine, but you're doing it with words and intelligence that is much more inviting and open in terms of the spectrum of people that may feel comfortable with reading something like this, and it's a wonderful way to ease oneself into the mystery, and specifically into the mystery via cards. The best known and perhaps most popular theory borrows from a set of paradigms developed by the Swiss psychoanalyst Jung. The basic idea here, in fact, that is enormously complicated, so this is just a very brief declamatory overview, is that we have a collective unconscious consisting of archetypal or primordial figures and structural patterns. And here you do the same with academia or the intellectual world. So you're enabling a wide spectrum of readers to to be eased into not just mysticism and tarot, but intellectual things, names that they might have heard, such as Jung, and it'd also make it easier to transition into more intellectual, academic sounding papers. This would be an excellent text to have. This would be an excellent text to have in a framework with a border that's not necessarily a new age. I'm lumping in with a new age tarot, psychic, magic, voodoo, astrology, Stonehenge, sort of looking package, because the neutrality of how you approach this and the accessibility, which is almost too hard to read for the average teenager, but it isn't. In fact, that it'd probably make the average teenager feel like, oh, this is something that I can read, that I enjoy. And it's an amazing bridge between high intelligentsia, which is frequent high stupidity, with the ignorant masses, which is usually very intelligent. It's perfect. because even somebody that doesn't hasn't used the word archetypal, they can read the paragraph, and that's almost like a child learning a language. There's an element of intuition where it's like primordial figures. Okay, so this could be if you're. Oh, I love this. This is a this is more than a bridge. This is a hub. In the context of what you started with, because if you were gonna start a page with this, then people uh, go, "Oh, this is about Jungian psychology and fancy words that I don't understand." But these references to Jung and Freud and psychology and archetypes and primordial figures are okay. About what, a half a dozen paragraphs, not even into is your relationship in trouble? Do you need deeper awareness and so on and so forth? So this is this is bordering on being a gem. Textually, again, I'd probably dress it different if I wanted, if my purpose were to have a page where there happens to be traffic that is not coming from the tarot spirituality community, but it's kind of like if you take a street or a mall and you want to put something about the tarot and spirituality and mysticism in the mall, but you decide that you're going to take a semiotic approach where you're going to go next gen, and you go, we don't want people to skip this because with in a fraction of a second when they're walking by between the food stand and the shoes store and the Apple store or whatever, that it's like almost a sore eye. Let's say, like, what's this? Oh, we're not going to stop at the new age thing. Where if it were integrated semiotically and visually, where it would not feel like it stands out. In that sense, if I were to dress it differently, that I'd keep the text the same. If you make an analogy between a web page that has traffic that is not normally tarot traffic or spirituality traffic, if you make an analogy between that and a storefront in a mall, I would, as far as the page, I would have different colors, different layouts, maybe even different images. Uh, I would probably not have the word tarot at the visible, quite so visible. In other words, and if it was or I'm thinking more of the right now. I'm thinking more of the store and the mall. Because one of my, if you look at card 17 and the dedication deck in Next Gen Tarot, implied in that is an Alice down the rabbit hole, which is that I actually want not just for BDSM and sex workers, but for arguably just about as much, if not more, for tarot, for what we have been using as tarot to become mainstream. But we're dressed in a way, just like when you walk down the street, you can tell. There's people that you can't tell who they'd vote for, but there's people that you know this person would never vote for Bush. If you see a chick that's got ragged, that looks like she'd go to the art cinema that night, and she's like that type of rebel, and you see another chick, and I deliberately use my words, look up language arts the thing in Total Marago. I'm not trying to be offensive. And you see another chick that's all like, rich, and she looks like Beverly Hills wife. You're gonna say, okay, I have to bet who votes for Bush and who votes for Obama, or who voted for Bush and who voted for Obama, because we're in 2016 right now. Granted, you should not come with that prejudice. It's one of my biggest issues. But statistically, just like a tarot card, we have immediate symbols, and in a storefront, we have immediate symbols. That chick would look like she'd vote for Bush, the other chick would look like she'd vote for Bush, like when we had that election. So even the colors, even using the for example, that would you okay a RoboCop card or one of my next or even uh, something between the RoboCop card and the one of my dedication deck cards. Okay, for example, if you go to the dedication deck and you go to card 9, I practice, practice, practice. If you were to put that in a mall where there's video games and bookstores and movie theaters and people are just coming out of Star Wars, but there was also the latest movie with Meryl Streep and about, politics and so on and so forth, and you got your smoothies and it's a mall. If you see a storefront that has, for example, maybe not quite so sexy, but the image from card 9 in the dedication deck at Next Gen Tarot, you probably have to go a little bit less sexy, but then now we're getting closer to the kind of storefront that people would go, if anything, wow, this is cool, we want to stop. Whereas if you got the, the Rider Waite Smith Sun card and a big sign that says Tarot and Psychic, does not make it easy for tarot to become mainstream. In fact, the word tarot doesn't make it easy to become mainstream. It's kind of like if you go to logicandfreedom.com and I'm talking about freedom, if I talk about anarchy, whoa. If I talk about freedom, that's a different thing. So in the context of we want the world to be well, it's not just about seeing to it that everyone has enough to eat and that everyone has a connection to the internet. It's also about enabling everybody to explore more of what the world has to offer instead of being stuck in, oh, I'm somebody that does board games, I'm somebody that doesn't do board games, I'm somebody that drinks beer, I'm somebody that's into business, I'm somebody that's into it's kind of like we have these you were talking about archetypes, we have them, we have stereotypes. They're not archetypes, they can be traced to stereotypes, but tarot is something that you can read. Tarot has to do with semiotics, tarot has to do with symbols, with understanding what the symbols mean. I further use it to understand where I want to go so that we can all be happy, starting with myself, which sounds very egotistical, but egocentric, we need to look at the origin of the word. Egocentric does not necessarily mean selfish. Egocentric is the necessity of the individual. I talked before about I, individual identity, being able to identify yourself as I. Egocentrism, by definition, in the etymological sense of the word, or in the technical sense of the word, more so than the etymological one, egocentric means that it reflects the ontological nature of the necessity of the fact that your perspective is your perspective, and you need to make sure that you're happy. It's all connected to the previous shit. What I'm trying to say, Donna, and I'm sorry about the vibe that it's been coming off of, because I don't feel the vibe really reflects the harmony that I feel with your words and with your thoughts. But your words and your thoughts were abrasive to me because they were so laden with what I call the European unaware communism mentality, which is profoundly against thinking for oneself, and it's profoundly for a, a parental or theological like figure, which the European unconscious communism mentality associates with the state, of a higher force that ensures fairness, which is not equality, because everybody being able to have enough to eat is different from equality. But this communism embedded in the psyche of most Europeans, which has flooded America, and I was a part of that because I was very left wing, and I thought, oh, we should have healthcare, we should have, how can we live in a country where the government doesn't, allows poverty and so on and so forth. And I realized it's a mistake to believe that mechanically the state can do that. I further realized that it's fundamentally wrong, because what it is that it's assuming dependence, and it's assuming disability and inability within the population or within large segments of the population, and it predicates dependence as opposed to independence. And the notion that it needs to come from above and that it needs to be forced by law. Why? Because the corporations are evil. And the fact of the matter is that if you've lived long enough in the school of hard knocks, you'll understand there's more evil in the average person than there is in the corporation. We have demonized corporations because what they do is that they actually behave precisely like the average person, which is they try to get away with what they can and they don't give a fuck about the other person. And we have associated that kind of behavior with corporations, whereas what it is it's an immature human behavior. Also due to the fact that even though deep down I think every human being and every CEO of and even the investors of a corporation have goodness in their hearts, and they would wish for everybody to be well when it gets down to the bottom. The fact of the matter is that it's overwhelming. How do we do that? I am somebody that says, okay, let's simplify and let's come to the awareness, not the law, but the awareness that it helps, it's good, and it's easy, extremely easy, though arguably philosophically questionable in the context of independence, but it's easy to have in this particular context and time of human evolution, that we devote 1% of our world's money to see to it. If you go to Everyone Can Have Enough to Eat, watch the video. We're that close to a stabilization in human population, and the people that are living on $1 a day could live on $2 a day. And living on $2 a day would make the difference between night and day. If everybody had food and internet access, and we're getting close to that. What people don't realize, and what I didn't realize, is that it's going that way. That's why the video Everyone Can Have Enough to Eat is fundamental. Not my video. It's from the Gatmounder Foundation. Hans Rosling, I believe his name is. So what I'm saying is that we might need a transition where we do give a little bit of help, and the simplicity of it is it costs us 1% of the world's wealth to see to it that everybody has enough to eat. Because in terms of the numbers of the 1 billion people that are hungry. And then the self-sufficiency is about to come regardless. So, but anyway, where'd that come from? Synchronicity. Now I'm going back to the, okay, I'm going to take a screenshot. Where did that come from? Synchronicity. Yeah, that's what the fuck. Let's put... Where that come from? Okay. All right. The thought here is that the tarot cards can reflect this typology. Okay, the basic idea here, in fact, it is enormously complicated. So this is we have a collective unconscious consisting of archetypal or primordial figures. Where are we at? 3440. Hello. Okay. Collective unconscious consisting of archetypal or primordial figures and structural patterns or behavior which present themselves in the form of images to the individual conscious mind. The thought here is that the tarot cards can reflect this typology. Freud has proposed a similar notion concerning forms of our mental lives. Archaic remnants, which would not be explained with reference to an individual's own life. Maybe you can think of a dream, especially the child, where you can be sure that you could not have experienced the images in your personal life history. Where did that come from? Okay, now we are starting to get a little bit too heavy into, again, insight and reflection as opposed to insight and reflection about how to fix your relationships, but I think we're going to get that. Where did that come from? Jung is also is also well known for his theory of synchronicity, a type of psychophysical parallelism whereby our thoughts can be reflected back. Judging by the vertical scroll bar, I'm close to being halfway through the text. So let's see how it works out with it. Even though I've read this before, at least part of this before. I don't remember. Let's see if it works out to where we do get back into relationships and as I say, collaborating with the cards. How would that go in the mall store? Collaborating with the cards. Once you're in, we can start talking about that, but do it properly. Collaborating with the cards, collaborating with the universe to make yourself happy. Type of psychophysical parallelism whereby our thoughts can be it can be reflected back to us through the external world, although the precise connections are organized in the capricious phenomenon or even obscure. It could just mean you're more attuned to notice. I'm going to read with my mind rather than with my words. We're all interconnected by kind of universal energy, often called source or the divine kind of otherness. There's a contradiction between calling it the divine universal energy and then calling it otherness, because bear that in mind, Donna. Of course, if this is a conversation as opposed to a monologue, this is something where you could actually talk back to me. This is a point that to me is very important. If we're choosing words, I believe that God has frequently been associated with something outside of us, and it's a contradiction to the fact that we are a part of it. So otherness is, I'd be interested to say, if we were to come up with the franchise of stores online and or in malls and or in the streets where there's foot traffic, and we want a harmonious connection throughout the universe, what terms do we want to use for shorthand that are neither the divine, the source, universal energy, otherness, ultimate mystery, which is one of the terms that I use, God, quote unquote, one of the terms that I use, logic, quote unquote, one of the terms that I use. It's almost like, just like my mom was saying, we don't have a word for the balance between being selfish and being altruistic. We don't have a word for that is culturally embraceable, like your text, like I was saying, your text is, but even more so culturally embraceable by everybody, that would work for as many people as possible, if not for everybody. That in a word or a phrase, ideally a word. Okay, so I want to implement, this is a draft, I want to implement and or produce and implement the most effective and efficient way for me to know the word and or phrase that would make, okay, I want to implement and or produce and implement the most effective and efficient way for me to know the word and or phrase I want to implement and or produce and implement, the most effective and efficient way for me to always be happy with the word and or phrase that people use I want to implement and or produce and implement, the most effective and efficient way for me to always be happy about the word and or phrase that at least the majority of people use to refer to what I have been addressing and or referring to as the connection of all with the ultimate mystery of course I'm thinking that inherent in that is happiness in the sense that I define it, which of course that's another term that I really 40 years I think if we had another word for that, but so I might as well throw in I want to implement and or produce and implement the most effective and efficient way for me to be happy about the word and or phrase that at least the majority of people use to refer to what I have been thinking and or referring to with my word happiness in my dictionary. Okay, the divine, a kind of otherness which as finite beings we cannot fully comprehend. Ultimate mystery doesn't ancient idea best known through Plato as the good beyond being. Epikaina Tesousias, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, and elaborated by Plotinus, who called it the One. Later transformed into God in Neoplatonic Christianity. The One is not necessarily a bad phrase. Although it's not necessarily ideal, but it's easier to imagine a scientist, an atheist referring to a concept of one, something that acknowledges this notion of one, as opposed to an atheist using the word God. A further theory is that perhaps ghosts and entities of the spirit world, of course it would be funny if we just said, okay, why don't we just call him Allah? Would that make, would at least, would that create more of a harmony between us and the those Can you imagine if all of a sudden America decided, okay, let's just call him Allah. Let's just not say God. Let's just say Allah for a while. How would that affect the energy in the cosmos? How that could be worth more as a gesture of respect of others and kindness and goodwill with how America is hated. Imagine if Americans started to say, Allah is great. America is one nation under Allah. With this science fiction, but in terms of vibrations, in terms of energies, that brings a smile to me. If we went through a phase like that, and of course, maybe we could come up with the whole other word, the made-up word. I mean, you know, have a word that is not English, that is not Esperanto, that is not, you know, a made-up sound of a and register the .com and let it be run by the people through the top choice system.com through we direct traffic on the internet. But anyway, further theory is that perhaps ghosts and entities of the spirit world which may occupy, and maybe that could change, like one year it's Allah, another year it's Donna. Or Tarot, Dawn Tarot, or later, or whatever. MH370, or is, or whatever, you know. Or what if it was AOHR? If or becomes a theme, a meme, and people just like, you know, you didn't know what Facebook was, and then it's like, are you on Facebook? What's Facebook? Okay. Oh, have you, if people would start saying, something where it's like or, and it's like OHR, which also connects logic in terms of or are, or what's or, and the discussion, ideally the conversation worldwide grows about or, so that in Modelland or whatever science fiction, time travel crossover.com, this paragraph would say, oh, let me try that. Oh, check this out. Oh, okay, let me try that. I'm gonna copy this text. I'm gonna use WordPad, and so Jung is also well known for his theory of synchronicity, a type of physical parallelism whereby our thoughts, and then here's what we're gonna do. Okay, Jung is also well known for his theory of synchronicity, a type of psychophysical parallelism whereby our thoughts can be reflected back to us through the external world. Although the precise connections organizing this capricious phenomenon remain obscure, it could just mean you're more attuned to noticing a particular thought or event arising in the external world. But Jung believed that sometimes this parallelism went well beyond mere coincidence. A further explanation that could converge on Jungian theory is a version of metaphysical monism, where it is believed that we are all interconnected by a kind of universal energy, often called source or the divine, a kind of quote-unquote otherness, which as finite beings we cannot fully comprehend. And quote-unquote detaches oneness from you or me, but I'm going to put you or me in quotation marks. And I'm actually going to put the period inside the quotation mark, American style as opposed to your style. So there's a signature there that with the Emperor card 4, I said this exactly, and with the High Priest card 5, everything creates records. It's like, were you aware that in the merging of Donna's text and your text in the one, yes, there's a period inside the quotation marks. Granted, there's other times when that could happen by mistake or whatever, but okay. So this is an ancient idea best known through Plato as the good beyond being, Epictetus, Ulysses, and elaborated by Plotinus, who called it the one. Later transformed into God Neoplatonic Christianity. After a phase of phases, I'm gonna call it phase of phases, in or around model in 22, wherein many Americans started to use Allah to many, wherein the majority of them, pretty much not pretty much would not sound like, wherein I'm gonna put Americans capital, Americans at large switched from God to Allah. Wherein Americans at large, we're gonna say young Americans, yeah, let's say young Americans at large, and much of America with much of America following suit, switch from God to Allah, especially via the internet and social media, as a gesture of goodwill. And subsequent temporary phases worldwide, where a variety of terms became memes, quote unquote, to reflect and indicate a switch towards, quote unquote, towards what academics later called next gen spiritual globalism, parentheses, a term much derided or rejected by a cultural sweep. Cultural sweep. Dunque. Okay, after a phase of phases in and around Model and 22, wherein young Americans at large, with much America following suit, switched from God to Allah, especially via the internet and social media, God, quote unquote, quote unquote, as a gesture of goodwill, and subsequent temporary phases worldwide where a variety of terms became memes to reflect and indicate a switch towards what academics later called next gen. Okay, memes for the concept of the one, for the concept of, okay, quote unquote, source slash the divine otherness, source slash divine otherness, God, one, etc., etc., etc. Ones, etc. etc. To reflect and indicate switch towards what academics later call humanity seems to have settled, at least for now, on ore. Now the question is, should I capitalize it or on or as or, or as most net speak preferentionists. I'm going to come up with a new word, preferentionists. Next thing, preferentionists or as most natural preferentionists spell it, or. So now let me read that. Young is also, oh no, what I'm going to do, well, sure, I can save it as text, but let me call it, sure, I can save it as text. Where are we at with the camera? Hold on. 1 hour.